What's up, Steno Squad? Welcome to the Steno Certification Podcast, where I interview StenoKey participants who have recently passed state and national certification tests. Stay tuned to get all the tips, tricks, and techniques so you too can pass your next certification exam. On this episode, we have a special guest, Susan Kim. Susan Kim is here to celebrate and share her success in passing her RPR. Susan and I first connected over our mutual love of planners and all things planner related. This was back in 2019 when she was a 120 Steno student. In December 2020, Susan was at 200 words per minute and she was looking to StenoKey to boost her Steno speed. But at that point, with where StenoKey was in the pilot program, I suggested she continue studying in her current program. Then, at the end of May 2022, Susan asked me, "What about now, Kat? Can I join StenoKey now? I really need your help with passing the NCRA RPR testimony." And at that point, StenoKey was in the position to help her. Susan Kim joined StenoKey June 2022, and 3 months later, in September 2022, she passed her RPR. Hey Susan, it's great to have you on the show. Tell us a little bit about your testing background. When was the first time you took the RPR?
The last time I took the RPR was the testimony portion, and I took that just last month in September.
And then you passed it, right?
Yes.
So congratulations on that. And that's why we have you on the show, is because now you are a full-fledged RPR and we want to figure out your history, talk about what you did that you really felt brought you to the level where you're able to pass such a respected certification test. So tell us a little bit about your Steno background. When did you start Steno school?
I started in the fall of 2017 with Mark Kitzlingberry Academy, and I learned my theory with the recorded videos. And then I started my speed building with Champion Steno for a little bit, and then I moved on to Simply Steno, where I built the remainder of my speed.
How was it learning the Magnum Steno theory online?
Learning the Magnum theory was pretty lonely because I had to do it all on my own. I did it with the recorded videos, but in retrospect, like if I had to go back, I think I would really take the time to learn it better and really drill it into my head, because I think I just crammed just to retain the information long enough to pass the quizzes, which doesn't really help with speed building later on. But overall, it was pretty good. It was doable.
How did you stay motivated during those online classes?
Well, I'm usually always looking up things to learn online, like through YouTube or whatever tutorials that I could find. So I was really accustomed to learning on my own, and I knew that I would do better learning on my own than going to a brick and mortar school. So it just worked out for me and my personality.
And so once you finished theory, you went to a speed building program and you worked on your speed. And then at one point you signed up for the test. When was the first time you took the RPR test?
The first time I took it was in January of 2021. And I don't think I was actually fully prepared for it. I knew that I didn't have the speed for the testimony, but I just really wanted to kind of experience the whole test taking process and just hear the dictations that are in the actual test.
And do you recommend that someone do that if they're not quite at that speed, sign up for the test anyway?
I think it's definitely a personal choice, but for me, I think it was worth the investment. I don't regret it.
Okay, so at that time, did you take all 3 legs or what portions did you take?
Yeah, I signed up for all 3 in the beginning just to kind of listen to the dictations.
And did you take them all 3 on the same day?
I think I took 2 on the same day and then 1 on a separate day.
How did that go?
Not well. I didn't pass any of them the first time around. But that experience really gave me like the motivation to come up with like a game plan for when I am really ready to take that test.
And then when were you really ready?
Well, I signed up for the next cycle, which was 2 months later. And I only signed up for the lit and the jury charge because those I thought I could pass. The testimony, I knew I didn't have the speed quite yet, so I didn't pass. I didn't sign up for that one.
Okay, and then, well, how did it go, the jury and the lit?
I passed them.
Were you like surprised that you passed them, or you were sure because you just knew you got it?
I was sure. Yeah, I was sure I was going to pass it. And I, like I said, I had a game plan, my experience with the first time, and I knew like how to just spread out the testing dates. For example, if I signed up for the lit for like 2-3 days leading up to the lit test, all I did was just as many lit dictations as I could. And then I scheduled my jury charge 3 days after that. So for the next 3 days leading up to my jury charge test, all I did was just jury charge. And that really helped me.
Okay. So let me ask you, because this is like really great info. So the lit, when you were doing your 3-day lit marathon, were you doing each dictation once, and what speed were you doing them?
I was doing them 20 words per minute faster than 180. So they were 200 words per minute and did them several times.
Okay, so were they like 4-minute files? Like, were they a 5-minute file that you just sped up to 20 words faster? Or?
Yeah, they were 5-minute files at 180, and then I used the speed control setting and I sped them up.
And then when you sped them up, did you transcribe your attempts? What did you do with your transcript at that point?
I would go over them one time, and then whatever mistakes that I could see, I would drill them, and then I would just do that take over and over again until I could get almost all of it with like no mistake.
Would you do the whole thing in the entirety, or would you just like stop the file if you made a mistake, or do 1 minute at a time?
So the first time I did the whole 5 minutes, and then I would go back and kind of look at some of the obvious mistakes and then drill them. And then I went back and did 1 minute increments. So I would do the first minute, and if I didn't have any like big drops or mistakes, I would just continue until 2 minutes. But if there was a mistake that I just feel like I could have done better, I would stop it and drill that portion, and then I would just start back again from the very beginning.
How would you put it into 1 minute increments?
I would just keep an eye on the clock, and then I would stop it or I would move on. Yeah.
How would you drill? Like, what kind of errors were you said obvious mistakes?
Okay, so if there are areas where there was like a large drop, and I would look at the word before that and just see if it was like a hesitation, and then I would literally just drill the word before it that I missed.
Like, so whatever you could identify as the cause of a large drop or cause of a drop, if you saw, okay, this is the word that caused me to hesitate and that's why I dropped, you would drill that word?
Yes.
How would you drill that word?
I would just keep writing it on my machine over and over, and I would like sometimes say the word out loud and then like just keep writing it.
When did you know you were done drilling it and ready to move to either the next word you had to work on or to restart the dictation?
I would just drill it like for a minute or two until I just kind of felt like, okay, I got it. And then I would start the dictation again. I realized that like if I drill for too long, I would get very, very tired of it. So I tried not to feel like I was over drilling. I was just doing it enough to kind of remind me, like, remind myself that, okay, this is the word and this is how I write it.
Okay, so in those 3 days right before your lit test that you passed, were you looking up briefs, or were you consulting your theory book at that time if there was a hesitation word or something that caused you to question your strokes?
I only looked it up. It was a word that I completely forgot, like how I would stroke it. But otherwise, I just tried to kind of tell myself, if I don't know it, just drop it and move on.
And then how did that work? How did that strategic dropping work for you?
I think that's definitely what helped me pass, because there were words that came up that I was very hesitant about. And I was just like, oh, I don't know it, move on. And I think that's what helped me pass.
And is that different a way of practicing then, I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks before you pass the test when it comes to the strategic dropping?
Yeah, because normally, like, I'm such a perfectionist that I need to know it. Like, I need to know how to write it, and I need it to, like, move along smoothly. The days and weeks leading up to the test, I was like, well, that's not going to help me right now. I need to just strategically drop and move on, or I'm never going to pass this test.
Let's talk about you took your lit RPR and you passed it. I'm assuming you felt great.
Yeah.
And then, but it was like, okay, no time to celebrate. We got to focus on the jury charge.
Yeah.
And then how did you go about practicing your jury charge, that 3-day marathon of jury charge practice? How did that go?
I mean, jury charge usually is the easiest for me. So I did go back in my theory book because there is a chapter that has like most of the jury charge related terminology and briefs. So I definitely like printed those out and just kind of taped them onto the wall. And I drilled them when I could, and it was easier. Definitely the jury charge was the easiest of the 3 tests.
And how often were you practicing? Meaning in those 3 days, were you doing multiple practice sessions? Was it just a big long session each day? What was it like?
I think I did 2 long sessions each day.
And how much of that time would you say was spent reviewing the briefs and phrases for jury charge?
Very little. Just leading up to the test, just those few days, I didn't want to cloud my mind with like trying to master more briefs. It was just basically get it down. And luckily, I was familiar with most of the terminology that came up, and I knew the briefs for them. So it was just, I really tried to concentrate more on speed. Like, again, I tried to practice at a higher speed.
And was that at 220 words per minute?
I believe so.
And would you ever go below 220 or so the 3 days before the test?
Yes, I would. Like every hour or two, if there's like a dictation that I was really struggling with and my confidence was just like going down and down and down, I would just speed it back down to maybe 180. And I would usually get a very clean transcript with that. And that kind of built my confidence back up.
How much of the test do you think is based on confidence? Like, how many people do you think have the speed, but because they lack the confidence, they're not passing?
I think many students probably. I'm one of them. The test anxiety and the mental portion was just what kept me from passing my test. So I could totally relate to that.
So did you experience any type of anxiety or anxiousness or nerves when it came to taking and passing your jury and lit RPR in March of last year?
Yes, with the jury charge, I was actually not that nervous. I think it also had to do with the fact that I had already passed my lit. So I was like, if I could pass the lit, I could pass the jury charge, no problem. But with the lit, I was a little scared and my hands were a little shaky.
And did they stay shaky throughout the whole test?
I think it stayed shaky for like the first half of the test. And then I think there was a moment when I realized, okay, this dictation is not as hard as I anticipated it to be. And then I could feel my body relax. And I was like, okay, I got it.
So let's move now to the testimony part. Testimony has quite a lot of history. So if you could guess, how many times would you say you took the testimony before you passed?
I think I took it 5 or 6 times.
And I'm guessing that was probably in the first time was after you like sat for the initial in January 2021 where you're just trying it out. Then
Yeah.
you took it probably like in May or June of 2021.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
So then you were basically taking it every other month for a year.
No, actually, the RPR testimony, from what I recall, I think the first time I actually attempted it, knowing I had the speed for it, was November 2021. And then since then, I kept taking it like every cycle. So I probably took it 6 times.
What do you think happened? Like, if you had the speed, just like you had the speed back in March when you passed your jury and lit, you signed up for RPR testimony when you knew you had the speed. What happened? Why didn't you pass?
I honestly don't know. I think a lot of it had to do with anxiety. I had really, really bad test anxiety, and I think it also came from self-doubt because I think I had the speed, but I wasn't 100%, 1,000% sure I had the speed. So I was probably doubting myself a little bit, which is probably what made me more nervous than I should have been. And so I think test anxiety had a lot to do with it.
Okay, so when you noticed that in November of 2021, you're like, okay, I didn't pass. I'm going to try again. What did you do to combat that test anxiety and to combat that self-doubt about your speed?
The second time I actually took it, I don't think I did anything profound. I think I still was in kind of denial about the fact that I had so much test anxiety the first time. So I thought, okay, well, since I already did it one time, this time I'm probably not going to be as nervous. So I just did the same things, like same practice routines, just drilling my hesitation words and then working on speed. And then I went and took it, and I was even more nervous than the first time. And my hands would not stop shaking. And I actually couldn't even finish the dictation, and I had to forfeit my test.
Oh my,
Yeah.
how did, like, because you were just shaking so much, like you weren't able to, like, were you like freezing up, you're like not writing, or?
I mean, my hands were like shaking so much. It just kept on pressing a whole bunch of keys that I was not intending to press. And I knew there was no way that I could even go back and look at the notes and figure out what I was trying to write because my hands were like all over the place, like raindrops.
Oh my gosh. Okay, and so then you just say, stop, I'm not doing this anymore?
Yeah, I was like, Mr. Proctor, I'm sorry, I can't take the test anymore. And so they released me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so then you braved it out and you said, I'm going to do another one.
Yes.
Okay.
There was no turning back. I had worked so hard for so long that I was like, no, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to get a certification. I want something to show that I put in all this effort and I achieved something. So I knew I had to test no matter what. So I actually had beta blockers prescribed to me. And so I took that for the next 2 RPR tests, and it helped a little bit with my hand shaking, but nothing much beyond that, to be honest. So that's when I kind of realized, okay, this is a mental battle because the beta blockers could maybe keep the hands from shaking, but my mind was still racing, and I was just kind of like, oh my God, this is so hard. I can't do it. And I'm like freezing up and doubting myself.
So first of all, what are beta blockers? Like, how does it work? You just take it the day of the test, or?
Yeah, you take it the day of the test, and I had to kind of experiment with it in a way to see like how much wouldn't slow me down too much. I think it's supposed to kind of make you a little bit more calmer. And I didn't want it to make me sleepy because I heard if you take too much or too close to your testing time, it could make you sleepy. So I figured out I couldn't take a whole pill. I took maybe like half of what was prescribed. I took it about an hour before I took my test, and it did help with the hand shaking.
Other than the beta blockers, did you do anything different the following 2 attempts, I guess, in 2022, like the winter, spring of 2022? I understand that you didn't pass those attempts, but did you decide to change anything with your practice routine?
I think I just focused on doing higher speed takes because that's what I thought would help me, but it didn't. So I failed the third one. And after that one, that's when I reached out to you and I was like, I know I'm not your typical candidate, but can I please join StenoKey and you could help me with my test?
Okay, and then I guess it helps.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, how was that for you? Like to to transfer into StenoKey? Like, how did that change your practice, I guess, your practice routine, your practice strategy?
Oh, it changed so many things because this whole time I was always told that if you practice higher speeds than your goal speed, then you're going to get it. But that was not the case because, like I mentioned, I was always online from day one, like learning theory, doing speed building. I was just always on my own. And so I didn't have anyone to really look over my writing and help me analyze it and to kind of build like a plan for me. And I knew that just doing it all on my own and just doing speed, that wasn't really helping me. So I kind of sat and I reassessed what I needed in my life. And I figured out I need theory review. So, and I knew you were like super knowledgeable about Mark's theory. So I was like, okay, this is the person I need. And I need her to like make me practice and go over my work with me. And when I came to you, that was like the first time anyone ever sat down with me and analyzed my writing. And you kept asking me questions like, oh, how come you wrote it like this? Or why did you hesitate over here? And those were like questions no one has ever asked me before. And I would analyze my writing sometimes, but it was never like line by line, phrase by phrase, brief by brief. And that really helped. And then you were able to help me figure out which concepts I was hesitating on. And so like I think it all kind of helped because I really needed theory review, and that's what I got.
So you started StenoKey when exactly?
When did I start? I think I started in the summer, like June maybe?
Yep, I think June 2022. Okay. And then so when did you take your next RPR Q&A?
And then I took it in July.
Okay.
And I did not pass.
Okay. How did that go?
I have to admit, I didn't take all your advice when I transferred over to StenoKey because I was not used to analyzing and transcribing every single take. And for me, I used to do hours of just speed. And so having to slow that down, having to break down my practice time and sit down and look at my notes, I was like, this is slowing me down. Like, I need more speed. And so I think I was just I did some theory review per your recommendation, but I think I also just kind of kept doing what I was used to doing. I could definitely say with confidence that I worked the hardest that 6 weeks that I was with you, incorporating not only, some of what you recommended, but also what I had been doing. And I worked so hard practicing and preparing for that test. And I thought I was going to pass that one. And when I didn't, I was just I was defeated. I felt so defeated. I didn't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, I think you took like a month off after that, right?
Something like that. Yeah, I took a long time off. I was so sad and so defeated.
But then you came back like towards the middle or end of August. You came back, and what changed? Like, what made you say, okay, I'm gonna keep going?
I actually reached out to some reporters and also students, and I was telling them, I feel so defeated. I'm so burnt out. Like, I don't know what to do anymore. Maybe this is all I could do. Maybe I'm not cut out for court. Maybe I just need to do captioning or something, which I had been doing. And so I thought maybe certification was just not in my future. And some of them reached out to me, and I remember one person in particular, I don't remember their name, and I probably wouldn't disclose their name anyway, but they told me that they had failed the California CSR more than 10 times. But now they're a working reporter, and they're so happy, and she told me to never give up. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And so, yeah, and then I reached out to you, and then you kept stressing, I need to work on the concepts that are kind of making me hesitate. So I took your advice, and you only wanted me to concentrate on my theory for a while. And I was like thinking, what? No, I need the speed. And but this whole time I wasn't 100% listening to your advice, and I was just doing my own thing. So I was like, you know what? Let me trust Kat this time. And so I did mostly only theory, and I think that really helped.
The theory files you were doing were like at 160 words per minute, but in Q&A format. Like, didn't it feel, I'm guessing obviously it felt super slow. That's why you felt like a little frustrated.
Yeah.
Okay. But now, like in retrospect, how did you see that working on slower theory files that you needed? Like, how do you feel that helped you pass your 225 test?
I mean, it definitely helped because, you master it in the process. So you don't hesitate when the actual testing comes. And even at the higher speeds, you're like, oh, I know that. And you just kind of breeze through it. So I think definitely theory review and solidifying the problems that you're having with certain concepts is so crucial.
And another thing you mentioned is like when you transferred to StenoKey, this is when you've really started having to transcribe everything. How did transcribing everything help you pass your 225 RPR?
Well, first of all, like you helped me point out some of the concepts that I was clearly making repeated mistakes on that I didn't know about. It definitely helped me see where the mistakes are and what I am not drilling enough on to fix my mistake. And I do realize, like, I had a bad habit of kind of trailing my left hand and making an unnecessary stroke when I was doing an answer bank. And that really helped me when I was taking my RPR because I found in my transcript when I was editing that I was also doing that during the test too. And so I knew immediately that was a misstroke and I could just delete that part out. Whereas if I hadn't been analyzing and looking at my notes before, I probably would have thought I was trying to write something and I would probably have guessed and gotten it wrong.
I totally understand because how you're writing when you're practicing is probably how you're going to write when you're testing. So if you could understand your way of writing, whether good or bad, it's just how you're writing, it's going to be so much easier to figure out what you were doing when it's actual test. I remember some of the tests that you took for Q&A in the last 2 months. Some of them you just felt like were really dense. Like you're like, this is too dense. How do you think that helped you, or maybe didn't help, but helped you pass your 225? Do you think it's good that you had dense material, or do you think it would have been better to have like not so dense material?
Honestly, I think a good mix of both is really good because with the dense material, you have to kind of get used to writing even a portion of a word that you don't really know how to stroke completely. And then you could try to figure it out later. But then also I feel like if it's all dense material all the time, then you're not really getting enough practice with what is usually actually on the test, like the easier stuff, like easier phrases and common words. So I think having both is really good, but I can't really say if the RPR dictations are easier or harder because I think it also depends on the dictation that they give you for that cycle because on some of the dictations that I got for the previous RPRs, they were just as hard and dense as what I found on the RTC. And then some of them were a little bit easier, but I mean, they don't trail too far from what we've been doing on Real Time Coach.
Were you trying to learn any new right-hand phrase enders or any new briefs in the 2 months that led up to you passing your testimony last week?
Yeah, the first month I tried to incorporate more briefs, and I think I write pretty short as is, but since I do caption for work, I tend to write some stuff out on purpose just to make sure I'm getting it completely right. So there's no hesitation like, oh, is this going to come out right or not? So I've gotten used to kind of writing out phrases that I know I have a brief for. So reincorporating that into that 1 month, the first month of practice, that really helped.
And you mentioned captioning, so I know a lot of people are going to be interested in that. How do you think captioning has helped you, or maybe hasn't helped you pass these tests that you've been taking?
It helps because honestly, you have no idea what they're going to say. And a lot of times I'm thrown into like Zoom business meetings and there's a lot of terminology and abbreviations and acronyms that I've never heard of. And in that moment, I have no choice but to do the best I can. So I think that really helped with being accustomed to hearing words that I'm not really used to. And then also, it doesn't really help in the fact that Q&A is so different than what people in the real world say. So it's not the same way of speaking. It's a sustained speed, and they never stop. So in that respect, it didn't help at all.
Another thing that maybe some people might not think helped, but I think did help, but is that you were doing lit files leading up to your passing of this test. Like you were doing the daily drill files, and I know you were doing some of the theory files that were in lit format. Obviously, that's different than what you were doing like with your practicing for your jury and lit and passing them, where you were just focused on that one category. How did you feel about incorporating lit practice into your attempts of trying to pass your RPR testimony?
I don't think I should have done it because I ran into more hesitation words than I was aware of because the dictations were so dense. And I was like, oh my God, like more stuff I need to work on. But like I said, it is good practice. Like I don't suggest doing it all the time, but maybe every hour or two, just throw in a lit here and there, just so that you're used to hearing more words that are not typical. And also just to give yourself a break for Q&A.
One of the things I remember, like when you first started at StenoKey, like you really were enjoying the theory files, but then you felt like, oh my gosh, there's so much I want to work on. How did you like battle that? Like feeling like, okay, yes, I do want to work on it, but I know I need to stay focused on why I'm actually here instead of trying to work on everything. How did you stay focused? How did you know what to practice? How did you know, hey, it's okay if I'm not using a certain right-hand phrase ender. I just need to focus on getting the words.
So like during the practice sessions, I would just try to be as perfect as possible. But then I also had to like switch into test mode whenever I'm taking a test. But like, it's okay if I don't know everything. Just try your best to stay on the speaker. And I mean, I had so many different concepts that I thought I had down that I found I didn't have down. All I could do was really like just be mindful of the kinds of hesitation words that I'm coming across. And there's usually a pattern. So I would focus on a few of those at a time before moving on to anything else. And also another thing I did was I really tried to master the smaller chain of commonly used words, like this is a, that is a, there is a, because those you could get wrong and you wouldn't even know they're wrong when you go into transcribe, because in some contexts it works regardless of what word that is. It's really important to get all the little words right.
And so how would you work on getting those little words right?
I did a lot of your theory files to do that. And I also drilled separately, like just 30 seconds, nothing but that word with commas in between.
What other type of drills? Did you do any finger drills leading up to passing the test?
I did some finger drills, but I'm so bad at them that I found it to be just so frustrating that I would only do them for about like 5 or 10 minutes before moving on to something else.
On another topic, you were telling me that you're having some issues with your hand, and I had recommended like the eye stipping, and I know you were a little concerned it was causing stress, and it was like right before the test. Like,
Right.
What happened? How did you fix it? Do you think it was maybe in your head, or what do you think was happening there? And yeah.
Honestly, I knew why I was having my finger joint pains. It was because I had switched to another phone, a bigger phone, and it was so heavy. And I was just on my phone a lot that time.
Oh my goodness, okay.
Messing with my joints. And I knew that was the problem. So I laid off the phone for a while, and then I tried your ice bath method, and I also ordered like the hand wax. I don't even know what they're called.
The paraffin.
The paraffin, I ordered that, and I did that every other day. And then I also bought a hand massager, and that really helped a lot too.
Oh my gosh, I would never think it could be a phone that's causing steno issues. Like, not in that way. I know a phone can do distract you from practicing, but I didn't know it could really.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. So let's talk about like right before the test. So right before the test, like the day before, 2 days before, how are you feeling? How are you preparing?
Honestly, with this past RPR that I passed, I decided to not pressure myself so much. And I just told myself, you know what? I took it so many times already. If I don't pass this one, I could take another one in 2 months. So I definitely kind of, mentally told myself not to stress so much this time. And, I was practicing, like I said, I was before, like similar methods, but I stopped doing the theory review about 2 weeks leading up to the test. And all I concentrated on was just doing higher speed.
And so how high was that speed? And I'm guessing it was for only testimony?
Yeah, I only did testimony and I would speed it up to 280. To be honest, 280 is like, it's not possible for me. So after listening to like one or two takes of the 280, I would go down to 240 to 260 and it felt just so much more doable.
And that would be the same exact dictation, you just change the speed?
Yeah.
Okay, and then like, would you transcribe at 240 or what?
I only would transcribe the 240, and then sometimes I would transcribe the 260 if I felt like I got a really good portion of it. I started doing this 2 weeks before the test, but I kept the same routine all the way up to the day of the test.
Okay, great. Were you practicing strategically dropping? Like, were you dropping the Q and the A bangs? Were you dropping punctuation? Like, talk us through how you practiced those 2 weeks before.
I knew one of the biggest reasons for my test anxiety was that the first time I actually took the RPR testimony, my dictation that they gave me, it was so heavy on proper nouns and I just froze up. And ever since then, every time I hear a proper noun, even though it's like a common word, I kind of freeze up. So I knew that I had an issue with that. So like what I did was I made a game plan. I was like, okay, since they give you a word list, I'm going to go through it. And usually words on the word list appear in the order in the dictation. So I just told myself, just write the first letter of that word, the first letter of any proper noun, and then I could go back and edit it in. That's what I practice. And obviously, strategically dropping is always something that I try to do. And I know it's like easier said than done, but I also found that doing the higher takes really helped with getting something for everything, because when that speed is down at your goal speed, since you've been doing the higher takes, it sounds a little bit slower, so you are able to get anything in for something, like get something for everything.
And so that's like, it was training your fingers to move fast.
Yeah.
And to react.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's really a lot of what it is. Like once you know how to write the words, it's all about your reaction time.
I agree.
And so just for like 2 weeks, you're just training your reaction time at a higher speed. So now going down to 225, like you had that cushion, like it was a lot smoother.
Yeah, it gave me time to catch up, or, like it was better, definitely, after doing the higher speeds. Like your reaction time does get better.
And were you going down to 225 at all in those 2 weeks?
Hardly. I would mostly do 240 and 260. And then maybe like every hour or so, I would go back to 225 just to test myself to see if I'm doing any better at 225.
And when you're saying test yourself, would you transcribe and grade it or what?
Yes, I would transcribe, grade it, and everything. And then I would go over where I'm dropping or getting the wrong strokes again and see if it's something that's worth working on or not.
Okay, and then like if you press play on a dictation and you realized, oh my gosh, I don't like the topic, or oh my gosh, this is really dense, would you keep going or would you like find another dictation file to practice?
When I'm just doing regular speed building, I would not listen to it. I would just press back. And then I remember you were like, how come you have all these dictations that show that you played them, but you didn't transcribe any of them? And I was like, oh, because I didn't like the topic or it was too dense. But then, when it's go time and you only have 2 weeks to expose yourself to as much like as many different kinds of dictations, you just stick with it. I didn't skip any of them.
Yeah, you have to practice pushing through no matter what it is about. How did you celebrate passing the test?
Oh, we just, my family and I just went out for dinner. It was a weekday, and so we just went out for dinner.
Okay. And then what's next? What's the next certification you're going after?
I actually signed up for the California CSR, and I'm also signing up for the CRR, which is the real-time test given by the NCRA.
Okay, and so I'm guessing you're taking those tests probably at the end of this year, like in the next 2 to 4 months.
Yes.
How are you planning on practicing? From all the attempts that you've done and from all the passes that you've had for your RPR, how are you structuring your practice plan for the next 2 to 4 months? What are you thinking it's going to consist of?
Well, as for the CRR, it's given at 200 words per minute, so I kind of feel like it's doable. So for me, my main focus for that test is to really clean up my dictionary and to just put in more words that I know I frequently might misstroke so that it'll come up correctly. And then for the California CSR, it's a 4-voice, so I've never done anything more than 2 voice. So that's going to be my biggest challenge, to learn how to do the 4-voice and to be comfortable enough to test for it.
Okay. And so I think it was yesterday when we had the book club, we had talked about the 4-voice and we said we put a folder with a whole bunch of 4-voice for you. But are you thinking of working on so because the CRR is in Q&A format, 2 voices. California is 4 voices at 200, right?
Yes.
But it's like for 10 to 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like super long. So are you going to practice for them the same way, or are you going to do something different, or you're not sure yet?
I'm really not sure yet because I'm just starting to get accustomed to doing the different speaker identification for 4 people. So once I feel a little bit more comfortable, I think then I'll have a better idea of how to practice.
What do you think you want to do differently this time around?
I think definitely not pressuring myself so much helped. So I definitely intend to keep that mindset. And one of the things that helped is watching like YouTube videos that are like self-affirmation. And I tried some hypnosis from, a link that a friend had sent me for the court reporting hypnosis. And I don't know if they were effective or not, to be honest. Like, how do you know? How can you evaluate that? Just to be very regular with my practice sessions and continue what I did. There's
okay.
No definite answer,
What would you give as any advice for anybody who's listening, who's maybe on the fence about signing up for the test again? Like, what would you tell them?
You have to do it. You have to. Like, you owe it to yourself because you've come so far and you've worked so hard. And I know people who are not in court reporting, they don't understand the struggle, but we're all here and we've all been through it and we know what you're going through, but you don't want to give up. It's just, you don't want to give up. You want to prove to yourself that you can do it. And I know you could do it. If I could do it, honestly, with all these failed attempts, anybody could do it. So don't hesitate. Definitely sign up and just strive for the best.
Love it. I appreciate that. And I want to thank you so much. And again, congratulate you, Susan, on your past test. And I know that there's many more past tests to come. And again, thank you so much for being on this episode.
Thank you for having me.